I've given it some thought, and against my better judgment, I think we're going to go through this carburetor and just clean it out. The reason why I'm doing that, I pulled a couple spark plugs off camera, and they look pretty lean to me. They also look brand new. But there's a lot of white deposits on there that typically indicates a lean condition. So rather than continuing to run this motor lean, I think we're just going to clean it out. Might regret this because the parts for this carburetor are extremely expensive. I think just a rebuild kit's like 120 bucks. So again, I might regret this, but hopefully not. Let's get some light on the subject. There we go. Just gonna remove the carb to be able to service it, obviously. Now this one is a date code, I think from 2005, so this should be a Nicky carburetor. I don't think they're typically very well liked, but I could be mistaken. Looks like we're gonna need a 7/16 socket to get those bolts off. Sorry, I was mistaken. I forgot this was a metric engine, 10 millimeter. Quite a mission to get to the carb. So these 4 screws, and there's one back here too. This should be the last screw. Move that little plate there, set it aside. I'm thinking this air cleaner cover should come right off, like so. Cool. It's holding it on, this tube. Where does that go? Looks like it goes all the way through, so I think we gotta push this thing back down. Maybe? Unless it comes out from somewhere else. Looks like it goes all the way down to the crankcase. I'd like to not break that because, like I said, parts of this motor are pretty expensive. We can't really work around it. Can we rotate this out of the way? Oh, alright, it just came off by itself. Alright, no big deal. Alright, so now we see our carburetor. Or at least I do. You guys don't see it yet. There, that's a better view. So here's our carburetor. We have our throttle linkage here. That's our choke linkage right here. And our throttle linkage is likely controlled by this little actuator thingy right here, which is, I believe, the auto idle adjustment. So this is what is responsible for putting the generator at an idle if it's under low or no load. And looking at this more carefully, it doesn't look like you can take this carburetor off without taking the engine cover off, the blower housing off, because the bolts that hold it on are actually screwed in from the bottom. How strange is that? Why would you do something like that? What a pain in the neck. So I guess let's start taking the blower housing off, because I think a lot of the carburetor parts we need to clean are on the lower half. You know, maybe let's just take the top section off first with these 4 screws, and let's see what things look like on the inside. If it looks beautiful inside, let's not waste any time taking this thing apart. If it looks like a varnished mess, that'll give us our answer. 1, 2, just making sure they all loosen and don't strip out. 3. This looks like a vent. Is this supposed to be run into a pipe somewhere? Are we missing parts here? Anybody knows, let me know. Now inside here should be the float chamber. I think that'll give us access to the pilot jet, but the main jet is actually all the way down there under that bolt. Some engines will have an anti-backfire valve, like a solenoid down there. But you can't really get to it with the blower housing off. Let's get these 4 screws out. Hopefully we don't damage this gasket. I think the gasket's like 40 bucks. Ridiculous. There are a couple different carburetors on this motor. This is, I believe, the Nicky. Let's take this upper half off. Will this gasket come off cleanly without tearing? Yeah, nice. Okay. Can we get our float chamber out? Our float out? There we go. Actually doesn't look all that bad in there. Get you guys a closer look. So you can see there's not a lot of goop in here, or varnish. There's a little bit, but it doesn't look too tragic. I'm kind of debating whether or not I want to invest the time to pull this thing apart now. Alright, why not? We're here, I suppose, right? Might as well finish the job. So to get the blower housing off, it looks like we have to take off a couple of 12mm bolts, a combination of 12s and 10s. Let's start on the left side. So it looks like we have 12mm here. That's kind of loose. Kind of loose is an understatement. And we have a couple 10mm down below that are going to be difficult to get to with a wrench. So I'm going to use one of these ratcheting wrenches. Again, not very tight. And we have a 10mm here as well. And I think pretty much the same situation on the opposite side. Now to get this carburetor completely off, I think the intake manifold has to come off. Let's move over to the other side. Same deal here. Now with models that have a fuel pump, I think the fuel pump's going to have to come off. I don't have one here. If I did have a fuel pump, it'd be mounted right here. It would pull vacuum from the number 1 valve cover. There would be a nipple on the side here. But it looks like I have this this fancy idle control to deal with, so I'm not getting off lucky, don't worry. Let's stick a socket on that 10mm because there's a wire loom there. It's really not that tight. What if someone's had this apart before? And then looks like we have 2 12s up here. We'll just set this idle control. It looks like a stepper motor. I'll set that aside. All right, let's see if the blower housing comes off. Here goes nothing. Maybe this 12 here has to come off. Doesn't really seem like it, but maybe it's clamping something down. That was the tightest bolt of all of them. Let's just loosen it and see if that helps. Nah, it's part of the housing. Oh well, thought I was going to get lucky. Let's try that again, take two. There we go. Someone's definitely been in here before. I can tell because I see a zip tie right here holding this plug wire, but I don't see one over here. I wonder if this was replaced. That says 05. It's probably original. I wonder if this coil was replaced. Maybe someone added that zip tie? Not really sure. So, let's see. I guess let's just take the intake manifold off, which is kind of the recommended procedure, and then we'll take the whole thing to the bench. Sure is a shame it has to be this complicated. And hopefully we don't tear any gaskets, because that sounds expensive. 1, 2, 3, 4. Let's see if it moves. Yep, okay. Hopefully nothing torn. Okay, just got to loosen this bolt here and cut that zip tie. Let me cut the zip tie now, actually. Always good to take note of your linkages and how they go together. So it looks like this one got this little positive retention clip. Just don't have the spring from it. Now the whole thing should come off except for the fuel line. Obviously make sure your fuel is shut off before you do this. You gotta go after this clip right here. Sorry guys, I realize you probably can't see. Just a clamp that holds the fuel line on. Okay. It's actually easier to remove the clip from the fuel line or the retainer from the fuel line with the manifold in your hands. Now we just got to remove the actual fuel line. It might come apart just from its age. Alright, got some gloves on just so I don't get any more gas on me than I already did. Try loosening the fuel line with a screwdriver and just kind of pry around it a little bit. You might need to cut it, redo it. Yeah, it's just starting to come apart. Kind of odd because it doesn't feel brittle. Just on there really well. Let's try twisting a little bit. Maybe that'll loosen it up. There we go. Let's dump any residual fuel right into the bowl. Not much. Good. All right, our carburetor is free. One thing I like to do just to avoid losing any fasteners, I like to screw them back in to where they came from fairly quickly. Especially if you're working something over the span of a couple of days. It's easy for things to get lost. You have kids, other people that come into your work area. So yeah, so just screw the screws and bolts back where they came from. Here's a better look at what we're dealing with. It's not that awesome in there. There's some crud. So let me dump this fuel out into a waste fuel container, and we'll start disassembling it further. Say goodbye. Okay, the carburetor is now drier. So let's see how this thing is held on. Looks like 12 millimeter, 12 millimeter. I'm hoping that gasket doesn't get destroyed. Trying at all costs to avoid buying parts. They seem to be so expensive for this motor, especially for card parts. One, two. Not all that tight again. Wonder if someone was into this too. Everybody wish me luck. Just gonna separate cleanly. Good enough. Now we have this bolt here, which is where the anti-backfire solenoid would have been. This engine doesn't have it though. So we'll just take that out so we can get access to the main jet, which is right behind it. It does actually look kind of cruddy. I don't know if you can see that. Take it out. Sometimes these don't like to come out until after the carb's been in cleaning solution for a while. Can you guys see that down there? Yeah, it's coming out perfect. Yeah, this needed to be done. Can I see light through it? I'm sure I can, but yeah, it looks restricted. That might explain some of the surging that we heard when it was running. Anytime they have that varnishy color to them, it's usually indicative of a problem of some kind. And let's take our pilot jet out, which I believe is right here. Doesn't look so hot either. Seen a lot worse, but I've also seen better. So I think that concludes disassembly at this point. There's not much to this carb. Let me get the ultrasonic cleaner ready to go and we'll let her cook. Start out with plain warm water. We're going to add just some simple green. Usually don't need too much. That should be plenty. I have this little parts basket here. I'm going to put the jet and all the small parts in. Okay, we have our main jet, our pilot jet, the needle, that little retaining pin that holds the float assembly, and the screw that blocks off where the anti-backfire solenoid will go. So we'll let this go in here, like so. We'll take the carburetor top half, we'll dunk it in there, like so. And we'll take the main carburetor body, and we will hit start. Come back in about 20 or 30 minutes. You can already see the water starting to turn darker. I mean, look right there. All that cloudiness. Yeah, I'm glad we did this. Okay, so the carburetor came out of the ultrasonic cleaner. You can see it is remarkably cleaner. I got the pilot jet reinstalled and the main jet. You can see how much shinier it is now. I can see a lot more light through it, so it was definitely blocked. So, good thing we did this. Actually kind of surprised it was running. Okay, let's put our needle back on the float. We'll drop that back in place. I think this was, what, just like this? Pretty sure. Why does this look wrong? Yeah, I'm pretty sure it is wrong. So how was this sitting before? Was it down? Was it like that? Can't really remember. I guess I could stop being lazy and go look at the footage, right? Okay, I got everything to seat. So this is how it's supposed to look. This has to go all the way down in that groove. And it should just be sticking up a little bit above the surface. Let's put our gasket back on. You can see which way it was on just by the indentations in it. You can see that there's large flat spots here. So that is the side that goes down like this. And then the top goes on like so. Just like that. There, nice and clean. Just tighten these 4 screws back on. Now, if you don't want to go through this process, or if you don't have the proper equipment, you can buy a new carburetor, but unfortunately it's like $350 to buy a brand new one. It's kind of crazy when you think about it. There are probably some aftermarket ones you can buy. I know this is a pretty popular engine from a performance perspective. A lot of guys use these on boats, and they use them on ATVs, so there might be some aftermarket source that I'm not intimately aware of. Now we have to reattach the carburetor to the intake manifold. Remember before I told you to put the bolts back where they came from. So it should go on just like so. Now in a perfect world, we would use new gaskets when doing all this, but like I said earlier, they're expensive. Every part for this engine seems expensive. Just a carburetor rebuild kit's like 120 bucks. Come on, really? The carburetor and manifold bolts get torqued to 60 inch-pounds. I said 65, right? Yeah, hopefully. Now let's go put this back on the motor. I'm going to cut off just that last maybe inch or so of fuel line just because it got a little boogered up. Fuel line itself seems to be in pretty good shape. So now, since installation is the reverse of removal, let's go ahead and put our fuel line back on. So it just slips over this nipple here. Let me slide our clamp over it. Make sure you slide it on completely. Have any fuel leaks, you get to do this job again. After a little fighting and swearing, got it back on. Just taking our intake manifold bolts out so we can get the intake manifold in place. Make sure you drop them a few times, that helps. And then just kind of weasel the intake manifold back into position. Probably best to get your throttle linkage in place before going too far. Put you guys so you can see this. So I just got the throttle shaft in there. I'm going to rotate this locking clip up to or down to grab it. Like so. Don't forget to grab the spring. Latch it onto the end. Just like so. Might as well get your choke linkage set up as well. I probably should have done that before doing everything else because that looks like it's going to be a little annoying. Let's go back and reset a little bit. Do your choke linkage first. Or maybe you just got to put that top back on last. Yeah, that's probably the way to do it. I'll take the top back off. Let's get our intake manifold bolt started. Let's get this one first. One on this side. Now, if your engine sees a lot of dusty conditions, this is a great time to look at your cooling fins to make sure they're clear. A lot of people overlook that, and they have engine overheating problems. So, make sure you keep those cooling fins clear, because if your engine overheats, you'll be blowing head gaskets, you'll be wrecking cylinder heads, valve guides will walk, I mean, all sorts of horrible things will happen. So definitely something to keep an eye on. Once you have your intake manifold bolts in all the way, torque them down to 140 inch-pounds. This is kind of important to avoid any intake leaks. If you have an intake leak, you'll have one cylinder that's running lean, and just bad stuff will happen. All right, so those are good. Something tells me those zip ties went factory, but they seem like a good idea nonetheless. So we'll zip tie these plug wires just to keep them out of the way, keep them from contacting anything, any spinny parts. Do one on each side. Trim off the excess. Oh, sorry, hit you. All right, now we need to take off the top of the carburetor and hook up our choke linkage. Lesson learned for you all. If you're doing this, just leave the top of the carb off. Just prevent any dirt from getting inside, though. Still think it's a stupid design. It's the first small engine I've worked on, perhaps ever, where you have to take half the front of the motor apart just to clean the carburetor. Normally it's 2 bolts, 3 bolts, a couple linkages, and that's it. It's kind of asinine how this is designed, but whatever. Now the lesson to be learned here is do not allow old gas to sit inside your engine, because that's what causes all this. You can see how much work it is to do on this motor. You get the idea. At this point, we should be good to put our blower housing back on. Now, if you put any fasteners on there, putting them back in place, now is the time to take them back out so they're not in the way. Took a few tries to get everything lined up, but I think I got it okay now. So don't forget your 2 12mm bolts on each side here. Of course, they don't want to line up. And get your 2 10s down here as well. The bottom one isn't cooperating either. Awesome. There we go. I think that got it. You have to get a bunch of different layers of sheet metal to line up for the threads to go where you want them. Let's work on the other side, then we'll come back to that lower 10mm. Okay, so now on this side we have this idle control system. That one's being difficult too. I'll tell you one thing, Kawasaki really wins from a serviceability perspective. You can have this blower housing off on their engines without actually even removing any fasteners, I believe, because they have that blower housing is slotted on theirs. Not only that, but on their engines they have cleanout ports at the higher end ones, so even further reducing the need to do this. Definitely don't need to pull the blower housing to clean the carb. Utter idiocy, if you ask me. Okay, let's do our lower 10mm bolts. So we got one here. cooperate. There's one. Pulling the starter rope a little bit seemed to help. I think we got that one too right there. Best to get them all in there loosely and then snug them up once everything's all lined up. I think, yeah, that helped the 10 millimeter on the opposite side. Now that one's going in. All right, so now we just got to snug everything down. Blower housing is good. Confirm there's no interference. Now let's get the air cleaner assembly reinstalled. Now on mine, the gasket kind of stayed where on this plate here. Yours may or may not, so just keep that in mind. When you put this back on, make sure that breather tube gets down in there too. Gonna reinstall these 5 bolts. You idiot, don't do it this way. You forgot the air cleaner support bracket. But you guys were yelling at me. You were, right? Man, can't fix stupid guys. I tell myself that every day. Even when I'm the one that's stupid. And 65 inch-pounds for all these fasteners. Don't normally use a torque wrench for this stuff, but I will for everyone else's benefit. Okay. Blow off the top of the air cleaner assembly just to get rid of any debris that may have gotten in there, just so it doesn't go straight into the motor as soon as you start it up. Open the fuel valve and give this thing a test. Home stretch, everybody. While this is far, far, far more complicated and difficult than it is on most other engines that are in this class, not a terribly difficult job, just time consuming. Nothing that a DIYer couldn't do themselves. And I'm getting tired and rushing and forgot to screw in the air filter nut. You guys gonna keep an eye on me. That'll do it, everybody. Okay, got the fuel valve cracked. Choke is on. Got my hearing protection on. Ignition is on. Let's see what happens. Okay, just ran it out of gas. So I think that's a wrap, everybody. So now you know how to take apart a Briggs Stratton Vanguard carburetor, clean it out, get it back into service, and fix any surging issues. Hope this video helps you. If you like this video, please subscribe, stay safe, and thanks for watching, everybody. Take care.